The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop screaming what Marcus already knew in his bones. He was lost. Not just on these dark country roads somewhere between Nashville and nowhere, but lost in the kind of way that makes a man question every decision that led him to this moment. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white, and in the passenger seat, his daughter Emma lay burning with fever, her small body shaking despite the blankets wrapped around her like a cocoon. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm cold." Marcus felt his heart crack a little more. 3 days ago, they'd buried his wife Sarah. Cancer, the doctors had said, as if that single word could explain the devastation of watching the love of your life fade away over 18 brutal months. Now Emma, his 7-year-old miracle, was sick, and Marcus had panicked. Instead of waiting for morning, instead of thinking clearly, he'd packed her into the car at midnight, determined to get her to Sarah's sister in Memphis, convinced that staying in their house with all its ghosts would somehow make everything worse. The GPS had died 20 miles back. His phone had no signal. And now, with the gas gauge kissing empty and Emma's fever climbing, Marcus knew he'd made a terrible mistake. That's when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape in the darkness, a figure standing beside the road in a yellow raincoat that caught his headlights like a beacon. Marcus slowed instinctively, his city-bred caution warring with desperation. As he drew closer, he could make out more details. An older black woman, maybe in her 60s, holding what looked like a lantern. She wasn't hitchhiking or waving frantically. She was just standing there, as if she'd been waiting. Against every ounce of common sense screaming in his head, Marcus stopped. He rolled down the window just a crack, rain immediately pelting his face. "I'm sorry to bother you," he began, his voice hoarse from exhaustion and unshed tears. "My daughter, she's sick and I'm lost and—" "I know," the woman said simply. Her voice was warm, rich like honey, with a southern accent that wrapped around the words like a hug. "Follow me. My house is just up ahead. You can't see it from here, but I've got medicine, warm beds, and a phone that works." Marcus hesitated. This was how horror movies started. Strange woman on a deserted road promising shelter. But then Emma whimpered, and he looked at the woman's face again. She had the kind of eyes that had seen suffering and chosen kindness anyway. The kind of eyes his Sarah had. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." She smiled, and something in Marcus's chest loosened just a fraction. She walked ahead, her lantern bobbing through the darkness, and he followed, his car crawling along the muddy road. True to her word, within 5 minutes, a house materialized from the gloom. A small, neat farmhouse with a porch light glowing like a promise. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old wood and something baking. The woman, who introduced herself as Miss Loretta, moved with practiced efficiency. She touched Emma's forehead, her expression growing serious, then disappeared into another room. She returned with children's Tylenol, a cool cloth, and a thermometer. 1025, she announced. "Not good, but we've seen worse. I raised 5 children and helped birth half the babies in this county before I retired from nursing. She'll be all right, but she needs rest and fluids." Over the next hour, Miss Loretta transformed from a stranger into something like salvation. She made Emma drink water mixed with electrolytes, got the fever medicine into her, and tucked her into a bedroom that Marcus learned had belonged to her youngest daughter, now a lawyer in Atlanta. "You can't drive anymore tonight," Miss Loretta said firmly, guiding a shell-shocked Marcus to the kitchen table. "That storm's getting worse, and you're running on empty in more ways than one." She set a bowl of soup in front of him, and Marcus realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. As he lifted the spoon to his mouth, his hands began to shake. Then his shoulders. Then everything. He folded forward. And the tears he'd been holding back since Sarah's last breath finally came. Miss Loretta didn't tell him to stop or that everything would be okay. She just pulled a chair next to his and put her hand on his shoulder. Steady as a lighthouse, and let him break. "I lost my husband 12 years ago, she said quietly when his sobs finally subsided. "Heart attack, sudden as summer lightning. I thought I'd die too from the grief of it. Had 4 kids still at home, bills stacking up, and a hole in my chest so big I could feel the wind blow through it." Marcus looked up at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. "You know what saved me?" she continued. A stranger. I was standing in the grocery store. Can't remember what I was supposed to be buying. Just standing there frozen, and this woman, didn't know her from Adam, she came up and took the list from my hand. Let me help you shop, she said. Such a small thing, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone. That kindness still existed even when it felt like the whole world had gone dark. Why were you out there tonight? Marcus asked. On the road in the storm? Miss Loretta smiled. My dog got out. Old fool of a hound, probably chasing a rabbit. I was looking for him when I saw your headlights coming up the road. Weaving all over. Figured you were either drunk or desperate, and something told me it was the latter. Found the dog already back on the porch by the time we got here? Marcus let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. So you weren't waiting for me? Baby, she said, her eyes twinkling. We're always waiting for each other. We just don't always know it. Over the next 3 days, as the storm passed and Emma's fever broke, Marcus lived in a kind of grace he'd forgotten existed. Miss Loretta made breakfast every morning. Eggs, grits, biscuits that tasted like clouds. She taught Emma how to feed the chickens in the backyard once she was strong enough to walk. She called the local mechanic, her cousin's boy, who came and fixed Marcus's car and refused to take more than $20 for it. But more than the practical help, Miss Loretta gave them something intangible. She talked about Sarah without fear, asking Marcus to tell her favorite stories. Laughing at the funny ones, crying at the sad ones, she treated the grief like what it was, not something to be fixed or rushed, but honored. On the morning they were set to leave, Marcus found Miss Loretta in her garden, tending to vegetables that would feed her through the winter. I don't know how to thank you, he said. The words felt absurdly inadequate. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. You don't need to thank me. You just need to promise me something. Anything. When you see someone standing in the rain someday, someone who's lost and scared and doesn't know which way to turn, you stop. You help them. You be for someone else what I was for you. That's how we keep each other alive in this world. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes again, but they were different now, cleaner somehow. I promise. Emma ran up then, throwing her arms around Miss Loretta's waist. I love you, she said with the unself-conscious honesty of children. Miss Loretta knelt down, cupping Emma's face in her weathered hands. I love you too, sweet girl. You take care of your daddy, you hear? He's a good man, and good men need people to remind them of that sometimes. As they drove away, Emma waving from the back window until the farmhouse disappeared from view, Marcus realized something profound. Sarah hadn't left them alone. She'd sent them to Miss Loretta, or maybe Miss Loretta to them. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that in his darkest hour, a stranger had chosen to be light. 6 months later, Marcus was driving home from Emma's school play when he saw a car on the side of the road, hazards blinking. A young woman stood beside it, phone held up uselessly, searching for signal. Marcus pulled over without hesitation. Need some help? He called. The relief on her face was so immediate, so profound that Marcus felt his throat tighten. He knew that expression. He'd worn it himself as he helped her change the tire, teaching her how to do it herself for next time. He felt Sarah's presence in the autumn air. He felt Miss Loretta's wisdom in his hands. He felt the promise he'd made taking root, growing into something larger than himself. Thank you so much, the woman said when they finished. I was so scared. You're like an angel or something. Marcus smiled, thinking of a farmhouse in the rain, a woman in a yellow raincoat, and the way kindness ripples outward when we're brave enough to offer it. No angel, he said. Just someone who knows what it's like to need help. Pay it forward when you can. That night, he told Emma the story as he tucked her into bed. She listened with wide eyes, then said, Miss Loretta was right. We do keep each other alive. Yeah, baby, Marcus said, kissing her forehead. We do. Outside, the stars shone bright and steady, mapping constellations of connection across the darkness. And somewhere in a small farmhouse on a country road, an old woman smiled in her sleep, dreaming of all the strangers who had become family, all the times she had stood in the rain and waited, knowing someone would always need the light.